Okay, so what I thought we would do today, yesterday we saw a halacha about what's considered to be fair and unfair competition as far as the laws of encroachment, encroaching on someone else's business and lowering prices, what's considered to be fair competition. And the reason why we entered into that discussion is because we were talking about the whole week about how much profit is a person allowed to make. And what we discussed is that that halacha took into consideration the the importance of not gouging customers by making excessive profit. But what about when the opposite situation arises, which is more prevalent in modern economy, where there are people who are undercutting each other and causing there to be a loss for the seller and a benefit for the buyer? So, so the bottom line is that as long as it's fair competition, where you're not perforce putting someone out of business by undercutting them, so then anyone can enter into the marketplace with their merchandise and sell. It's a free market, and if a person wants to lower prices so that the profit margins are lower, he has a right to do so. And this is also mentioned in Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah has a statement over here in Siman Kuf Nun Vav. Does everyone see my screen? From the Bar Ilan CD. The Ramah writes as follows at the very end of this comment: Shnei b'nei Adam hadorim biyachad. You have two people who live in the same community. V'ha'echad rotze lahozil b'halavoas haribis la'ove kochavim. And one of them wishes to lower interest rates on loans made to non-Jews. In other words, that's a typical way that Jews make their money in the medieval world, by money lending. And one Jew wants to lower interest rates. And the other guy's saying, hey, I've had a good business here for all these years, made a parnasa by charging, let's say, 5%, and now you're lowering it to 3%. Yeah, you're cutting into my profit margin. So ein chavero yachol limchos bo. So he can't protest. In other words, he doesn't have an argument. It's a free market, and anyone who wants to enter that market of money lending has a right to do so. V'hu hadin b'chol kayotze bazeh. And the same thing applies in all similar cases. Now, this is really where there are subtleties in halacha that we have to look at very, very carefully. And that's really what I wanted us to take a look at, which is there's a tshuva there's a commentary called Pischei Tshuva, which goes on the Shulchan Aruch and provides case histories and responsa that discuss in more detail some of these halachic issues. And so the Pischei Tshuva on that statement of the Ramah states as follows. He says, "V'ha'echad rotze lahozel ein chaver yachol limchos bo," that the other party cannot protest if the new guy on the block wants to lower interest rates. Ayin b'tshuvas avi adoni zekeni panim mi'iros chelak aleph siman ayin chester, who refers everyone to his father's sefer called panim mi'iros, about the following case: Odos machzike arentz shehziku shnei kfarim b'tchum echad. It seems to be a certain region where there are two villages in one general geographic area. A village could be 50 people. It's like in the old world in Europe. That's what we're talking about. Kol echad misar echad, and every village is under the jurisdiction of a different. I don't know, what would you call it? A duke or a lord or whatever it is, a land baron. V'rodze echad limkor mashke yayin saraf v'sheichar bizol yoser mima shenikva hashar b'medina. And there's a new guy who comes along, and he wants to sell liquor and beer at a price that is lower than the index that has been set by the government. Government has created an index of what the prices on liquor and beer are, and he wants to undercut all of the other sellers, and he wants to sell it for less. V'hasheni mocha biyado ba'amro, ki hu gorim lo hezek shal yidei zeh margil lovo etzlo anshe hakfar shelo lishto sham. And the fellow in the adjacent village is saying that's not fair. He says, I'm going to lose all my customers. They're going to come to you in the adjacent village, and they're going to buy from you, and I'm going to lose all my customers. It's not right. Veheshiv. So the question is, what's the halach? Veheshiv denira da'afilu be'ir uvishchunot Yisrael shehalokchim nehenim afilu hachi yecholim sha'ar mochrei shecher v'yain sarif la'akev al zeh. And he said that there is a good argument to prevent a person from lowering the prices from what the government index currently is for those types of commodities. And why is that? And so here we're going against what we just read in Shulchan Aruch. In Shulchan Aruch, it's an open market, and anyone can charge whatever interest rate they want. Over here, when it comes to selling liquor, so then there is a right for one seller to block the other seller from lowering his prices. So the question is why? What's the difference? Viraya de Amrinan Perak HaZahav V'lo Yivchos HaSha'ar V'chachamim Omrim Zochor Latov. He says there's a Gemara in Bava Metzia that brings a machlokas as to whether you're allowed to cause the market index price on certain commodities to be lowered. So the first opinion is no, you can't do anything that's going to cause the market prices to drop. And the Chachamim say, no, just the contrary. If you do so, you shall be remembered for the good. You're a good guy if you cause the prices to drop. Mai taimayu de rabbanan, deka mishum deka miravach litara. And the question that the Gemara asks is, why do the Chachamim say that you're a good guy if you lower the prices, if you cause the prices on that commodity to drop? So you are causing miravach. You're opening up the price index. And what does Rashi explain? L'pirish Rashi the otzrei peros yiru shehuzlu v'yim karu bizol. Rashi explains that when one person starts selling an agricultural commodity at a lower price, then all of the other people who are keeping this commodity in storage, they will see that the price has been lowered, and they too will sell it at a lower price. And that seems to be fairly self-evident, right? So that's the point that the Sefer wants to make. It says, "Umideparich my taima de rabbanan, v'halo hatamhu pashut b'shvil shemehana halokchim Yisrael." Like, it's a strange question to begin with. Why, the Gemara asks, why do the Chachamim say that he's a good guy by lowering prices? Isn't it obvious? The Jewish consumers will benefit. Ulakach nakti lashon bracha zocher latov. After all, isn't that why the Gemara says he should be remembered for the good? We're blessing him because he's causing the Jewish consumer to benefit. So why did the Gemara even ask it in the first place? Ela al korchach de lo mashkechinon betovas halokchin kaven deikap seda lemochrin. He says the answer that you have to conclude with is that sometimes that's not the only calculus as to whether we take into account the fact that the consumers are benefiting. What if, at the same time that the consumer is benefiting, the sellers are losing out? He says, in the illustration that we've provided, there's already a government fixed amount on these items. And if the government has issued what standard prices are, then you're in violation of Dina de Malchusa Dina by going below those prices that the government has set for these commodities. He says it's only if you can cause the government prices to be lowered through your actions, then you're allowed to do it. But if the government is going to maintain those prices, irregardless of your action, so then you have to abide by the law. V'im kain, he says, therefore, he wants to make the following distinction. Zeh dafka b'mechiras peros utavua, kishiyiru otzrei peros shehuzlu yaviu kol perosem limkor v'yishtana hashar. If you can affect, by lowering your prices, you can actually affect the entire market for that commodity. Because when other people who are holding that commodity in storage, it's an agricultural commodity, and they're going to lower their prices as a result of your selling something for less money, so then that's okay. That's beneficial to the consumer, and it's a loss that the sellers can bear. Aval b'mechiras hashechar mikol makom al yidei zeh lo yimkaru b'zol hatvua chulei. But let's say you're talking about a processed commodity. We're talking about beer. Okay, what do you make beer out of? You make beer out of grain, out of barley, out of wheat, depending upon where you're from. When I was in Germany, I had wheat beer, because Germans like to drink beer made out of wheat. So you make it out of grain. So in that situation, by lowering the price on beer, you're not causing the price of wheat to go down. You're only causing the people who sell beer to incur a loss, because they're going to have to pay the same amount for the raw agricultural product of wheat. Their costs will not go down. So it's one thing if through your lowering the prices, you're creating an entire shift in the market so that everyone will share in there'll be an even distribution of losses across the index. So you're not creating an acute loss for anyone who sells this commodity, because let's say I own a general store, and if I lower my price on sugar or wheat or things like that, this will cause the farmers to lower their prices as well. In other words, it'll have a domino effect on the entire commodity, right? But in a situation where my lowering of my prices will not have a domino effect, and if I charge a lower amount for beer, it's going to severely cut into my business, because my costs will remain the same on the procurement of the commodities that I need to manufacture my product. So then that becomes a problem in halacha, and that seems to be a very subtle distinction. And you can see how it's not so easy to make that distinction as to when it is permitted to lower prices and when it's not permitted to lower prices. If by lowering prices I'm manipulating the entire market on that commodity so that there's an even distribution of losses throughout the chain of supply, so then that's okay. But if through lowering of my prices I'm not causing the entire chain to lower its prices, and I'm going to have to cause all of the other sellers of this processed commodity to incur significant losses, so then it's not okay. Upshita benidon didan, shahalochim heim ovdei gililim, devada yochol la'akev. And therefore, certainly, where the purchasers primarily are Gentiles, in this particular scenario, where two Jews were selling beer in a particular region, and most of the purchasers were non-Jews, and so therefore there's not even that argument to be made that you're benefiting Jewish consumers, so then surely you have to take that into consideration. So how is this different from the case that the Shulchan Aruch writes, that the Ramah writes, that if two Jews live in the same area, one party cannot stop the other party from lowering his interest rates on loans. He says, "Shiny ribis de'in shar yadu ala ribis, or rashaish kol echa levater ktsas kadei sheyargil ha'ovdei galilim etzlo." He says interest rates are different. There is no fixed index on interest rates. And, well, that's, again, in the medieval world. People can charge whatever they want. And by the way, when it comes to private lenders, the same thing is true even today. It's only banks that have fixed indexes on mortgages and lending and things like that. But even then, a bank can charge whatever it wants above the index to make a profit. So even if there is an index, there's always a point or 2 points or 3 points that you can charge above that. So one guy wants to lower his interest rates and not take a point on the loans, and the other guy is protesting. He says then it's okay. It's therefore no different, because what is he doing it for? Why is he lowering interest rates? Because he wants to get more business. So he's created a new business model. There's one guy who's got a business model where he keeps his interest rates high, and he'll get fewer loans, but he'll get the loans where people come to him and they'll borrow money. And he'll make a lot of money on a fewer amount of loans. Another guy comes along and he says, no, I have a different business model. My interest rates are going to be razor thin, and I'll make money off of volume, right? So in that kind of case, you can't make the argument that one person can stop the other person. It's a different business model. You're welcome to enter into that same kind of arrangement. And it's no different from a businessman who owns a store and he wants to attract customers. So he has premiums and he has giveaways and he gives away candy to kids so that his mom will come and shop at the store. And then he continues and he says, "Ubifrat b'mechira shecher v'yayin saraf, shehu michok hamalchus ve'en hatvua nimkeres bezol machma shehu mocher bezol hashecher." He says, and therefore, when you're dealing with beer and liquor, where which is regulated by the government to some degree, the wheat prices will not go down as a result of lowering the prices of beer. Then it seems quite clear that the other beer merchants, have a right to make a claim against him and prevent him from lowering prices. Be'im shehu osa shecher tov yoser mechavero, shederech ha'olam lokeach min mida tavua gimel midos shecher, v'hu lokeach shtei midos v'chetzi, v'al yedei zeh margil etzlo nira deshaper dami. He says, but what if you have a new manufacturer who is able to manufacture a better quality beer? So, for example, he is able to create what he seems to be saying is it's a more concentrated, flavorful beer. So, because normally from 1 measure of wheat you can get 3 measures of beer, and this guy is able to only extract 2.5 measures of beer from the same measure of wheat or barley, and it comes out to be a better quality, like a premium beer. So he says that no one can stop him from selling it and undercutting the other beer merchants because he's selling a premium beer. The damya leahimas nisin damarle ana mafligna amgoze v'chuli adkan devarav ayin sham. And he says it's no different from a competitor who's saying, you can sell what you want, I'll sell what I want. Whatever product you sell, you can't stop me. Let's see. Okay. In any event, what I wanted to observe from this exercise is that it's not always so clear cut when you can when you are allowed to um, prevent a competitor from doing whatever he wants, even if it's going to undercut you. There are many different mitigating circumstances, and even in the halacha that we saw yesterday from the Rav Shulchan Aruch, that you don't have a right to stop someone from opening up a competing store. There are circumstances where you will be able to stop a person. Let's say, for example, and the example that's given is as follows. Let's say there's a street that is a dead end street, and you have a widget store at the end of the block, and this guy comes at the very dead end of the block. And this guy opens up a store, the exact same product, widgets, and he sets up shop at the entrance to that dead end street. So now that everyone who's going to come into that street is going to is going to pass that other guy's widget store before they even have a chance to go to your widget store. So there are circumstances where you can stop the other person from opening up that store. Okay? Again, if it completely forces you to close your business, then you are allowed to stop the person. It's only if the argument can be made that it's an open market, there's room for competition in this market, and therefore let the consumers decide which product they prefer. That's where we say that one party cannot stop the other. And the same thing goes for price fixing. If two people, if it's an open market and one person wants to undercut the other person, okay, under most circumstances it's permitted, unless the argument can be made that you are artificially lowering prices to a point where I'm not even able to compete anymore. So under certain circumstances, it will be mutter for this to come to Beis Din, and the Beis Din will say, well, you're causing this fellow to go out of business. You don't have a right to put him out of business. You have a right to compete with him, but you can't put him out of business. And if let's say there could be a situation where one seller has access to a certain provider, and he's prevented his competitors from having access to that provider, which is why he's able to undercut. So these are all very complicated issues, and that's why sometimes these issues will come before a Beis Din. And I know that, for example, there were two shawarma kosher restaurants that opened up a few years ago, right, like two doors away from each other on Bathurst Street down south, and one wanted to bring a din Torah against the other, and I believe in that situation the Beis Din ruled that let's just see what the market will bear. There is enough of a market, of a consumer market, for them to be able to compete with each other, and let's see who charges the better price and who provides the better service and who provides the best product, and whoever prevails will prevail, and the consumer will benefit. And in that situation, neither of those restaurants had established a customer base for any extended period of time, and so it seems that the Beis Din ruled correctly that there was no basis to preventing one store from opening to protect the other store. But perhaps, let's say, in a different situation, that might have changed. The Beis Din has to look at it based on and use their discretion in all of these cases. Questions, comments?
Just one quick thing, Rabbi. I mean, if the intent is to compete fairly and let the better person win, and then the consumer wins as well, But sometimes it's I want to push the competitors out of the market, and then I'll jack up the prices when there's no competitors left. And
Right.
so it's short-term gain for the consumer for long-term pain.
That's right.
So I don't know whether that can be considered, whether you can understand what the consequences are for that happening.
Right. And that's something that that the Beis Din would have to take into consideration. Whether this lowered price is a sustainable reality, or whether it's only being done in order to, because that guy has deeper pockets and he can last longer taking that kind of loss, so that he'll eventually put everyone out of business. That's called dumping in modern economics, and it's considered to be an unfair practice, an unfair trade practice, and it can be actually it can be regulated, as a matter of fact, if it can be demonstrated that a party is dumping in certain markets, in certain commodities. And the same thing presumably would be true in halacha as well. Okay, so this is our last class until after Sukkot. We're going to take a break until after Sukkot because um, we could all use a little bit of a break. And Mirz Hashem, after Sukkot, we'll send out a notification that after Sukkot we will resume the shir. Okay, and this is a good place because we just finished chapter 3, and we'll start a new sugya, Bezrat Hashem, starting after the holidays. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
So a
Thank you.
Gemar Chasima Tov, everybody. Have a good
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
גמר חסימה טובה, everyone.
Shabbat Tova.
גמר חתימה טובה.
And good Shabbos.